Nathan Carter had everything a man could ever want: wealth, power, and an effortless charm that made him the center of attention wherever he went. At 34, he was already a billionaire, having built a technology empire from scratch. His name was synonymous with success, and his life was a series of extravagant parties, business deals, and fleeting romances. Despite being surrounded by luxury, Nathan never took relationships seriously. Love to him was nothing more than a game, a challenge he could easily win. Every woman he pursued eventually fell for him, some drawn to his looks, others to his wealth, and many enchanted by his smooth words. He never had to try too hard. Everything always came easy. That was until Clara Evans entered the picture. Unlike the women Nathan was used to, Clara was different. At 32, she was a talented graphic designer working at a respected creative agency. She was reserved, introverted, and completely uninterested in the social circles that Nathan thrived in. While others basked in his attention, Clara seemed completely indifferent. Nathan first saw Clara at a high-profile gala hosted by his company. The event brought together influential figures from the business and creative industries, and Clara's firm had a partnership with Nathan's company, making her attendance mandatory. As guests networked, flaunting their achievements, Nathan noticed Clara sitting quietly in a corner, sipping wine, her eyes scanning the art pieces displayed around the room. She was different. She wasn't vying for attention or trying to impress anyone. She simply observed, detached from the glitz and glamour. Later, at an exclusive gathering with his closest friends, the topic of conversation turned to Nathan's ability to win over any woman. "Nathan, you've had every type of woman," one friend smirked. "But have you ever won over someone who didn't even acknowledge you?" Nathan arched a brow. "What are you getting at?" Another friend leaned in with a knowing grin. "That woman? Clara Evans. She didn't even look at you during the gala. I bet you can't make her fall for you." Nathan's pride stirred. It wasn't love or admiration. It was a challenge, an attack on his ego. "Oh, month," he declared confidently, "and she'll be mine." Laughter erupted as the bet was sealed. If Nathan succeeded, his friends would fund a lavish vacation for him. As the city lights reflected off his glass of whiskey, Nathan saw this as nothing more than an easy game. What he didn't realize was that this game wouldn't just change Clara's life, it would change his own forever. Nathan Carter had never lost a challenge. He was a man who always got what he wanted, whether it was billion-dollar deals or fleeting romances, and this time would be no different. The morning after the bet was made, Nathan began his research. It didn't take long to find information about Clara, her company profile, a few online articles featuring her designs. But one thing stood out. She was nearly invisible on social media. No flashy vacation photos, no extravagant lifestyle posts, no attempt to seek validation from the world. That only intrigued Nathan more. Digging deeper, he discovered a key detail. Clara had a habit of visiting a small coffee shop near her office. Unlike the high-end restaurants and lounges Nathan frequented, this place was quiet, unpretentious. If he wanted to approach her, this was the perfect opportunity. That afternoon, Clara sat alone at her favorite cafe, flipping through the pages of a book while sipping her mint tea. The hum of light chatter and soft jazz music filled the air, creating a serene bubble around her. She was so immersed in her reading that she didn't notice the tall figure approaching until a smooth voice broke through her thoughts. "What a surprise to see you here." Clara looked up, startled. Standing before her was Nathan Carter, the billionaire she had only briefly encountered at the gala a week ago. He held a cup of coffee in his hand, his signature confident smile in place, as if this meeting was purely by chance. She blinked, slightly taken aback. "Nathan Carter?" Nathan chuckled. "That's me, but just call me Nathan. Mind if I join you?" Clara glanced around. There were plenty of empty seats, yet here he was, asking to sit with her. Refusing him outright felt unnecessary, so after a brief hesitation, she nodded. "Go ahead." Nathan took the seat across from her, watching her with interest. She was unlike any woman he had ever met. She didn't try to impress him, didn't lean in flirtatiously or laugh at his every word. Instead, she maintained a polite distance, guarded yet calm. "I was surprised to see you at the event last week," Nathan started. "You don't seem like the kind of person who enjoys those kinds of gatherings." Clara lifted her cup of tea. "I didn't have a choice. My company has a partnership with yours, so I was obligated to be there." Nathan smirked. "So you weren't there for me? Ouch, that stings." Clara glanced at him, momentarily caught off guard by his playful tone. Then, to his surprise, she let out a small laugh. It wasn't forced or calculated, just a soft, genuine reaction. For the first time, Nathan realized just how intriguing she was. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, even though she remained somewhat reserved. Unlike other women, she didn't fall into his charm immediately, and that only made him more determined to win her over. Nathan Carter was never the type to give up. Once he set his sights on something, he pursued it relentlessly. After their first encounter at the cafe, Nathan made it a habit to coincidentally show up there every afternoon. At first, Clara found it odd. Was a billionaire like Nathan Carter really spending his free time at a quiet little coffee shop every day? But eventually, she got used to seeing him there. They talked more. At first, their conversations were light, mostly about work and everyday topics. But then, Nathan discovered something unexpected. Clara changed completely when she talked about art and design. Her eyes lit up when she spoke about the painters she admired, the masterpieces that inspired her. As she explained how colors and lighting could evoke emotions, Nathan realized something. Clara wasn't dull at all. In fact, she was fascinating. She just hadn't been given the chance to shine. As the days passed, Clara found herself looking forward to their coincidental meetings. She didn't understand why. Maybe because Nathan always knew how to make her laugh, or maybe because their conversations made her feel more like herself than she had in years. She had never been a social person, but with Nathan, she felt truly heard. He didn't just offer empty compliments. He actually cared about what she had to say. One afternoon, Nathan invited her to try out a newly opened restaurant. Clara, who usually declined social invitations, surprised herself by saying yes. For the first time in years, she put on a dress instead of her usual work attire. When she walked into the restaurant, Nathan paused for a moment before flashing a smile. "You look beautiful." Clara hesitated, unused to such compliments, but there was something sincere in his gaze. She smiled softly in return. That evening wasn't just dinner. It was a turning point. Clara realized she was no longer the woman who hid in the shadows. And Nathan, he realized this was no longer just a game. Clara had no idea that all this time she had been nothing more than part of a cruel game. She didn't know that Nathan's coincidental meetings, his thoughtful messages, his gentle compliments, all of it had begun as part of a bet. She didn't know that even as Nathan started to develop real feelings for her, he still hadn't found the courage to tell her the truth. Until that fateful night. It was a party hosted by one of Nathan's close friends. Clara, still somewhat hesitant about crowded events, had agreed to go with him. What she didn't know was that every single person in that room knew about the bet. Except for her. The evening started smoothly. Nathan stayed close to her, shielding her from the prying eyes of those who knew the truth. But as the night wore on and the alcohol flowed freely, someone, too intoxicated to hold their tongue, let slip the one thing that should have never been spoken aloud. "So Nathan, did you win the bet yet? 1 month to make Clara fall for you? Or do you need more time?" The entire room fell into a suffocating silence. Clara stood frozen, every word sinking into her like ice-cold daggers. Slowly, she turned to face Nathan, searching for denial in his eyes. But Nathan, the man who always had the perfect response for every situation, was suddenly speechless. Clara felt her chest tighten, making it hard to breathe. "Tell me, Nathan, is it true?" Her voice trembled, but the pain in her eyes was louder than any scream. A hush fell over the room. Conversation stopped. People exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the storm about to break. Nathan's throat went dry. He had faced ruthless business tycoons, negotiated deals worth billions, but never had he felt this helpless. "Clara, I can explain." His voice cracked, but Clara had already taken a step back, then another. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, as if she was struggling to breathe. "So it was all a joke to you?" Her eyes glistened, not with anger, but something far worse: disappointment. Everything inside her was collapsing. Every beautiful moment she had believed to be real, every gentle word she had thought was sincere, had all been part of some twisted game. She had been nothing more than a mere challenge for a man who had never valued love. Nathan reached for her hand, desperation in his touch, but Clara shook her head, disappointment clouding her gaze. "I thought maybe this time I had found someone who truly cared about me." She inhaled deeply, steadying her trembling voice. "Thank you for showing me that I deserve something better." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Nathan standing there, alone with the crushing weight of his own regret. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Carter realized that he could have everything in the world, yet still lose the one thing that truly mattered. Clara had cried. The first few nights after learning the truth, she felt like she had been thrown into a storm of emotions. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation. She didn't just lose faith in Nathan, she felt like she had betrayed herself. How could she have been so naive? How could she have believed that someone like Nathan Carter, a billionaire, a man who could have anyone he wanted, had truly cared for her? But then, through the tears, a different thought crept into Clara's mind. Had she always believed she wasn't good enough? That she wasn't worthy of being truly loved? Had she spent her entire life hiding in the shadows, assuming she wasn't meant to take up space in the world? For the first time, she saw the truth. This heartbreak wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The next morning, Clara looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but deep inside, a fire had been lit. She made a decision. She would not let this pain define her. She signed up for a gym membership, something she had always avoided, fearing judgment from others. She boldly pitched a new project at work, and for the first time, her superiors saw her not just for her talent, but for her confidence. She explored new experiences, taking dance classes, making new friends, stepping into spaces she once feared. She changed her style, no longer dressing to blend in, but choosing outfits that made her feel powerful and radiant. The journey wasn't easy. There were days when she doubted herself, moments when she felt like retreating back into her old self. But step by step, she didn't just heal, she became the best version of herself. She was no longer the quiet woman who faded into the background. Now she walked into a room with confidence, no longer afraid of being seen. And most importantly, she had learned to love herself in a way she never had before. For a long time, she had thought Nathan was the one who had opened her eyes to the world. But the truth was, the only person who could truly change her life was herself. 2 years had passed, but Nathan Carter had never forgotten Clara Evans. He had tried to reach out, calls, messages, even long heartfelt emails. But all of them went unanswered. Clara had completely disappeared from his life. At first, Nathan thought it was just regret, a fleeting sense of loss. But as time went on, he realized something deeper. Clara wasn't just a challenge from his past. She was the only woman he had ever truly loved. And that realization changed everything. The old Nathan thrived on games, on shallow conquests that meant nothing. But after losing Clara, he knew he couldn't continue living that way. Nathan walked away from the flashing lights and empty conversations of high society. The penthouse that once hosted endless parties now felt hollow. He buried himself in work, but this time not for profit, for purpose. He launched an initiative to support young artists, personally mentoring aspiring designers. Late at night, when the world was quiet, he found himself scrolling through old messages from Clara, wondering if she'd ever see the man he was trying to become. At first, it was just an attempt to silence the guilt, but somewhere along the way, he realized he wasn't doing this for her anymore. He was doing this for himself. And most importantly, he worked on becoming a better man. For the first time in his life, Nathan Carter truly grew up. On a crisp autumn afternoon, in a small cafe downtown, Nathan stepped in to grab an espresso, and that's when he saw her, Clara Evans. 2 years had passed, and she was almost unrecognizable. She was no longer the woman who hid in the shadows. Now, she radiated confidence, strength, and an undeniable presence. Nathan felt his breath catch. She sat by the window, flipping through the pages of a book, her expression calm yet filled with a quiet happiness, not because of someone else, but because of herself. Slowly, Nathan walked toward her, his heart pounding harder than it ever had before. When Clara finally looked up, their eyes met. A small smile crossed her lips, serene, without bitterness or pain. Nathan took a deep breath and spoke. "Hello, Clara." She tilted her head slightly, setting her book down. "Hello, Nathan. It's been a while." And for the first time in 2 years, Nathan Carter felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. A chance to do things right. Nathan Carter had never been a man who knew fear. He had walked into billion-dollar deals without hesitation. He had conquered challenges that seemed impossible. But now, sitting across from Clara Evans, he felt a nervousness unlike anything he had ever experienced. Because this time, he wasn't afraid of losing a deal. He was afraid of losing her. Not because of pride, not because of a bet, but because he knew that if he lost her again, there would be no third chance. They sat across from each other in the quiet cafe, the soft hum of conversation filling the air. Nathan knew he couldn't just say, "I'm sorry," and expect Clara to forgive him. Words weren't enough. He had to show her. "Clara," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know I never stopped thinking about you." Clara studied him, her expression no longer filled with pain, but not entirely open either. "Nathan, 2 years ago you hurt me in a way I never imagined. It took me a long time to put myself back together. I don't know if I can go back to that." Nathan nodded. "I understand, and I don't want you to go back. I want to move forward with you." From that moment, Nathan didn't rush or push Clara to rekindle what they had before. Instead, he proved himself to her, one day at a time. He showed up not to impress her, but to be a real part of her life. He cared about her work, supported her projects, and truly listened when she spoke. He was no longer the arrogant man he once was. Now he was humble, sincere, and simply wanted to be with her. And little by little, Clara saw it. She let him in. One winter evening, after a long, exhausting meeting, Clara stepped outside to find Nathan waiting for her. In his hands was a cup of hot cocoa, and in his eyes there was no smugness, no games, only love. She sighed, looking up at him. Nathan met her gaze, searching for something. Hope? Forgiveness? Anything. Clara exhaled, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Nathan, people don't just change overnight." "I know." His voice was steady. "I don't want you to trust me because of what I say. I want you to trust me because of what I do." Clara studied him, looking for the arrogance that had once defined him. It wasn't there. "Then show me," she finally said. "Prove to me that you mean it." Nathan nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I will." It wasn't a grand, romantic gesture. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was simply two people who had once hurt each other, finding their way back through something real. And this time they loved each other, not because of a game, but because it was what they truly wanted.